A little girl with one leg watches other children play with their fathers, dreaming of something she believes she'll never have. Living in poverty with her struggling mother, she faces her 7th birthday with a heart full of longing. In a moment of desperate hope, she makes a call that will shatter the carefully constructed walls of a CEO's perfect life. What dark secret has been buried for 7 years? And what happens when innocence collides with power, forcing a man to confront the truth he never knew existed? Before this story begins, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Your opinion matters to us. The September morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small apartment on Maple Street, casting gentle shadows across 7-year-old Charlotte's face as she stirred awake. Today was different from every other morning. Today, she turned 7. The little girl with golden blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail sat up slowly, her eyes immediately falling on the pair of silver crutches leaning against her bedside table, her constant companions since the amputation 4 years ago. Charlotte had been born with a severe bone condition affecting only her right leg. By the time she was 3, the doctors had made it clear the leg had to go or the condition would spread. Her mother, 33-year-old Victoria Hayes, had held her daughter through every tear, every nightmare, every moment of doubt. They'd survived on Victoria's 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and waitressing during the day. But survival was all it ever was. There were no extras, no luxuries, just love and determination in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where the heating sometimes failed and the refrigerator hummed too loudly. "Happy birthday, sweet angel," Victoria whispered, appearing in the doorway with a tired smile that couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her gentle brown eyes. Her auburn hair was pulled back hastily, and she still wore her waitress uniform from the night shift. In her hands, she carried a small cupcake with a single flickering candle. Charlotte's face lit up despite the familiar ache in her chest, the one that always appeared on her birthday. "Thank you, Mama," she said softly, her voice carrying that particular sadness that broke Victoria's heart every year. "Make a wish, baby." The little girl closed her eyes tight. Through the thin walls, she could hear the Morrison family next door, Mr. Morrison's deep laugh as he probably chased his kids around, the sound of a father being present. Charlotte had made the same wish for 4 years now, ever since she was old enough to understand what she was missing. She wished for a father. Someone who would teach her to ride a bike even with one leg. Someone who would carry her on his shoulders and make her feel like she could touch the sky despite being anchored to the ground by crutches. She blew out the candle. "What did you wish for?" Victoria asked, though she already knew. She always knew. "Nothing, Mama. Just nothing." Victoria's heart crumbled a little more. She'd told Charlotte the story so many times it had become their painful truth. Charlotte's father had died before she was born. A car accident, sudden and tragic. Victoria had learned long ago that some lies were necessary for survival, and this one had protected them both from an even more painful reality. The day passed in the quiet rhythm of their modest life. Victoria had managed to scrape together enough for a small birthday cake from the discount bakery and a used bicycle she'd found at a yard sale. It was pink with white streamers on the handlebars, and when Charlotte saw it, tears streamed down her small face. Not tears of joy, but of frustration and longing. "Mama, I can't ride this," she said, her voice breaking. "I only have one leg. I need someone to teach me. I need a daddy like the other kids." Victoria knelt down, pulling her daughter close. "I know, baby, I know, and I'm so sorry. But you're the strongest, most amazing little girl in the whole world. We'll figure it out together, okay?" But Charlotte couldn't be consoled. She'd watched the children in the park all summer, watched as fathers ran beside their children's bikes, hands ready to catch them, voices full of encouragement. She'd seen the bond, felt its absence like a physical wound deeper than the one where her leg used to be. That evening, while Victoria was in the shower washing away the exhaustion of another double shift, Charlotte sat on the worn couch, staring at her mother's phone on the coffee table. She'd seen her mother check it 1,000 times, had watched her thumb through contacts during the rare quiet moments. Charlotte knew she shouldn't, but the desperation in her 7-year-old heart was overwhelming. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone. The password was her birthday. Victoria had told her that once, in case of emergencies. Charlotte's fingers moved slowly. 0915. The phone unlocked. She scrolled through the contacts with her small finger, her heart pounding. Most were names she recognized. Aunt Rachel, Dr. Peterson, the landlord Mr. Chang. But then she saw it. Emergency contact. JH. Just initials, no name. Charlotte had never noticed it before. Her chest felt tight as she pressed the call button. Part of her didn't even know what she was doing or who she was calling. But 7 years of longing, 7 birthdays without a father, 7 years of watching other children live the life she dreamed of. It all came pouring out in that moment. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a deep, authoritative voice answered. Hello? Charlotte's breath caught. She hadn't thought this through. The voice wasn't familiar, but it was masculine and somehow commanding. Before she could lose her nerve, the words tumbled out in a desperate rush. Daddy, if you're listening to me, I just wanted to have you with me just once to teach me how to ride a bike. There was silence on the other end. Complete, shocking silence. Charlotte's heart hammered in her small chest. Who is this? The voice finally asked, and there was something in it now. Shock, confusion, maybe even fear. I'm Charlotte, she whispered. And today's my birthday, I'm 7. And I don't have a daddy and I just wanted. Her voice broke into sobs. 43-year-old Jonathan Hendricks stood in his downtown office, 30 floors above the Seattle streets, staring out at the city he'd conquered through sheer will and ruthless business acumen. His company, Hendricks Technologies, was worth billions. He had everything: power, money, respect. What he didn't have was whatever this phone call represented. His mind raced. A little girl, calling him daddy, on a number he'd set up 7.5 years ago as an emergency contact for. Victoria. The name hit him like a physical blow. Victoria Hayes. The woman he'd loved with a passion that terrified him nearly 8 years ago, when he was 35 and she was 25. The woman who'd disappeared from his life without explanation, leaving only a brief note. I can't do this. Please don't look for me. He'd been devastated, but he was also practical. He'd respected her wishes, thrown himself into building his empire, convinced himself he'd moved on. But he'd never removed her emergency contact from his phone. Some small, secret part of him had always wondered, always hoped she might call. But this? A child? Charlotte. He repeated slowly, testing the name on his lips. Where's your mother? In the shower. I shouldn't be calling, but I wanted a daddy so bad and Mama says mine died, but I saw your number and I just thought maybe. She was crying harder now. Jonathan's hand gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind was calculating, analyzing, trying to make sense of the impossible. 7 years old. Victoria had left nearly 8 years ago. The timeline. Charlotte, honey, I need you to do something for me, he said, his voice gentle despite the chaos in his mind. I need you to give the phone to your mother when she comes out, okay? Can you do that? Are you my daddy? The hope in her voice was absolutely shattering. Jonathan closed his eyes. I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out. I promise you that. He heard movement in the background, then a woman's voice. Charlotte? Who are you talking to? Then there was a sound like the phone being dropped, followed by Victoria's voice, breathless and terrified. Charlotte, what did you do? More fumbling, and then Victoria was on the line. Hello? Her voice was barely a whisper. Victoria. Jonathan's voice was ice and fire combined. We need to talk. Now. There was a long pause, and he could hear her breathing, could almost feel her panic through the phone. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaking. Jonathan, I can explain. You have a daughter. Yes. How old is she? 7. She just turned 7 today. The calculation was automatic, instant. I left town nearly 8 years ago for that conference in Tokyo. You came to the airport. We'd only been dating 3 months, but we spent the night together in that hotel. And then I flew out for 3 weeks, and when I came back, you were gone. Silence. Victoria. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Is she mine? The pause that followed felt eternal. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice was broken. Yes, Charlotte is yours. And Jonathan, there's something else you need to know. Something about why I left, about why I never told you. It's complicated. Then uncomplicated, I'm coming to you. Where are you? Jonathan, please, you don't understand. Address, now. She gave it to him, her voice resigned, defeated. As Jonathan grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator, his mind was already working through scenarios, possibilities, implications. He'd built an empire by seeing 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But this was something he'd never seen coming. A daughter. His daughter. 7 years old, missing a leg, living in poverty while he sat in a penthouse unaware. As his private car pulled away from the building, Jonathan stared out at the passing city and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not of business rivals or market crashes, but of what he was about to discover. Because Victoria's words echoed in his mind, there's something else you need to know. Whatever awaited him in that small apartment on Maple Street, Jonathan Hendricks knew his perfectly ordered life was about to shatter completely. The drive to Maple Street took only 25 minutes, but to Jonathan it felt like hours. His driver, Marcus, had learned long ago not to ask questions when his employer's jaw was set in that particular way. The expression that meant someone's world was about to change, usually not for the better. But Marcus had never seen quite this look on Jonathan's face. A mixture of fury, confusion, and something that almost looked like terror. The neighborhood that emerged through the car windows was worlds away from Jonathan's life. Cracked sidewalks, buildings that needed paint, windows with cardboard patches, chain-link fences, and the kind of tired atmosphere that came from people working 3 jobs and still falling behind. Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. His daughter, if she was truly his, had been living here while he'd been closing deals in boardrooms and dining in 5-star restaurants. "Sir, this is the address," Marcus said quietly, pulling up in front of a worn apartment building. Jonathan stepped out, and immediately several heads turned. His $1,000 suit, his polished shoes, the luxury car, they all screamed outsider. He moved toward the building entrance, finding apartment 3B on the buzzer panel. His finger hovered over the button for a moment, before he pressed it firmly. "Hello?" Victoria's voice crackled through the ancient intercom, shaking with anxiety. "It's me." The buzzer sounded, and Jonathan entered a dim hallway that smelled of old cooking and cleaning products. He climbed the stairs, each step heavy with anticipation and dread. When he reached the 3rd floor, Victoria was already standing in the doorway of apartment 3B. 8 years had passed, but she was still beautiful, perhaps even more so with a depth in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her auburn hair was longer, pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore simple jeans and a faded t-shirt. The exhaustion was evident in every line of her face, but there was also a fierce protectiveness in her stance. "Jonathan," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. He didn't respond, just looked past her into the small apartment. And there, sitting on a worn couch, was a little girl with golden blonde hair and his own gray-blue eyes. She was holding crutches, and the resemblance was so striking it stole his breath. She had his nose, his chin, even the way she held her head when she was uncertain. Charlotte stared at him with wide eyes, taking in his expensive suit, his commanding presence, the way he seemed to fill the entire doorway. "Are you the man I called?" she asked in a small voice. Jonathan nodded slowly, unable to speak for a moment. Then he found his voice. "Yes, Charlotte, I'm the man you called. Are you my daddy?" The hope in her voice was almost unbearable. Victoria made a small sound of distress, but Jonathan's eyes never left Charlotte's face. He walked into the apartment, and despite the anger burning in his chest toward Victoria, despite the questions and confusion, he lowered himself carefully to one knee in front of the couch, bringing himself to Charlotte's eye level. "I think I might be," he said gently. "Would you like that?" Charlotte nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I wished for you. Every birthday I wished for you. Something broke inside Jonathan's chest. He reached out slowly, and Charlotte immediately threw her small arms around his neck, sobbing. He held her carefully, feeling the fragility of her small body, and over her shoulder he met Victoria's eyes. The look he gave her was clear. "We will talk. Soon." After several minutes, Charlotte pulled back, wiping her eyes. Do you know how to teach someone to ride a bike?" Jonathan's throat tightened. "I do. Even someone with only one leg?" He looked down at her left leg, ending at the knee, then back at her hopeful face. "Especially someone with only one leg. Because that means they're already braver than most people ever have to be." Charlotte's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face. "Mama got me a bike for my birthday. It's pink. Can I see it?" She nodded eagerly and grabbed her crutches, maneuvering with practiced ease toward a tiny bedroom. Jonathan stood, and the moment Charlotte disappeared, his expression hardened as he turned to Victoria. "Outside. Now," he said quietly. Victoria nodded, calling to Charlotte. "Sweetheart, stay inside for a few minutes, okay? I need to talk to Mr. Jonathan for a moment." They stepped into the hallway, and the moment the door closed, Jonathan's control snapped. "Nearly 8 years, Victoria. 7 years she's been living in poverty, believing her father was dead, while I had no idea she existed. Explain. Now." Victoria's face crumpled, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "That night at the airport hotel, after you left for Tokyo, I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. I was terrified, Jonathan. We'd only been dating 3 months, and you were always so focused on your business, so driven. You were 35, building an empire, and I was 25, working 2 jobs just to survive. I convinced myself you wouldn't want a child, that it would ruin your plans. That wasn't your decision to make." Jonathan's voice was harsh, though he kept it low enough that Charlotte wouldn't hear inside. "I know. Don't you think I know that?" Victoria's voice broke. "But there's more, Jonathan. When I was 4 months pregnant, I found out about Charlotte's condition. The doctors told me the bone disease was severe, that she would likely need amputation, that she would need constant medical care, expensive treatments, surgeries. I looked at your life, the empire you were building, the perfection you demanded. I was 25, working 2 jobs, barely surviving. I thought you deserved the choice not to be trapped, and I couldn't bear the thought of you resenting her, or me, for ruining your perfect life." Jonathan stared at her, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. "You thought I would reject my own daughter because she had a disability? I thought you deserved the choice not to be burdened. I thought—" Victoria's voice caught. "I thought I was protecting everyone. You from a responsibility you never signed up for, and Charlotte from a father who might resent her limitations. That's the most ridiculous, insulting thing I've ever heard." Jonathan's eyes blazed. "You made assumptions about who I am, what I'm capable of feeling. You stole 7 years of my daughter's life from me based on your own fear and prejudice. I was wrong." Victoria was crying now, her shoulders shaking. "I know I was wrong. I've known it for years, but by then it was too late. How do you show up in someone's life after years and say, 'Surprise, you have a disabled daughter who lives in poverty'? I was ashamed, Jonathan. Ashamed of my choices, ashamed that I couldn't provide better for her, ashamed that every day she asked about her father and I had to lie." Jonathan turned away, his hands clenched into fists. He looked out a grimy hallway window at the street below, trying to process the tornado of emotions raging through him. Anger, yes. Betrayal, absolutely. But also, grief. Grief for all the moments he'd missed. Charlotte's first steps, or would have been if she'd had both legs. Her first words. Her first day of school. Her struggles with the amputation. 7 birthdays spent wishing for him. The emergency contact. He said finally, his voice flat. "Why did you keep me as your emergency contact?" Victoria wiped her eyes. "Because some part of me always hoped. I don't know. That maybe someday, if something happened to me, someone would call you. That Charlotte wouldn't be alone. I was 25 when I made that choice, Jonathan. Young, terrified, and convinced I was doing the right thing for everyone. She's been alone her entire life because of you. I know. Victoria's voice was anguished. I know, and I'll never forgive myself, but Jonathan, she called you, she found you. And now you're here, and I'm not going to stop you from being in her life if that's what you want. I'm just asking, begging, that you don't hate her because of what I did. Jonathan whirled around, his eyes fierce. Hate her? Victoria, the moment I saw her face, I knew. She's mine. Every instinct I have is screaming it. And I don't just want to be in her life. I want everything I've missed, every moment I was robbed of. Do you understand me? Victoria nodded, relief and terror mixing in her expression. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to get a paternity test, though I already know what it will say. Second, I'm going to meet with my lawyers about custody arrangements, and third, he paused, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Third, I'm going to make sure my daughter never wants for anything again. Not medical care, not stability, not opportunities. Nothing. Jonathan, please don't take her from me. I know I don't deserve her, but she's my whole world. She was my whole world too, and I didn't even know she existed. His voice rose slightly, then he controlled it with visible effort. I'm not making any decisions right now. But Victoria, you need to understand something. My daughter spent her 7th birthday desperately calling a stranger, hoping for a father. That ends today. One way or another, I'm going to be in Charlotte's life completely. Before Victoria could respond, the apartment door opened and Charlotte appeared on her crutches, her face worried. Why are you fighting? She asked, her voice small. Is it my fault because I called? Both adults immediately softened. Jonathan moved toward her, kneeling down again. No, sweetheart. This is absolutely not your fault. Your mother and I just have some things to work out, grown-up things that have nothing to do with you, okay? Are you mad at me? Never, I could never be mad at you. He reached out and gently touched her hair. Charlotte, I need to ask you something important. Would it be okay if I took a little test to make sure I really am your daddy? It doesn't hurt, just a quick swab in your mouth. Charlotte looked uncertain, glancing at her mother. Victoria nodded, her eyes still wet with tears. It's okay, baby. And after that test, Jonathan continued, would you like me to come back and visit you? Maybe bring a special bike, one that's made just for you? Charlotte's eyes went wide. Really? A bike just for me? Absolutely, and I'll teach you how to ride it, I promise. The little girl launched herself forward, nearly losing her balance, but Jonathan caught her smoothly. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she cried, hugging him tightly. Over her head, Jonathan met Victoria's eyes again. The message was clear. This conversation isn't over, not by a long shot. An hour later, Jonathan sat in his car while Marcus drove back toward downtown. A small collection tube carefully packaged beside him, containing Charlotte's DNA sample. He'd already called his private physician to arrange the fastest possible processing. In his other hand, he held his phone, staring at a photo he'd asked permission to take. Charlotte smiling, holding her crutches, with hope blazing in eyes that looked so much like his own. He made several calls in rapid succession. First, to his lawyer, Marcus Chen, whom he'd known for 15 years. Marcus, I need you to start preliminary research on custody law. I'll explain everything tomorrow, but it's urgent. Second, to his assistant, Karen. Find me the best specialist in pediatric prosthetics on the West Coast. I don't care what it costs. And research adaptive sports equipment for children, specifically bicycles. I want a full report by morning. Third, and most painful, to his mother, Margaret Hendricks, who'd been asking him for grandchildren for a decade. Mom, I need you to sit down. I have something to tell you, and you're not going to believe it. By the time he reached his downtown penthouse, Jonathan had set in motion a series of events that would reshape multiple lives. But as he stood in his immaculate living room, surrounded by art worth millions and furniture that cost more than most people made in a year, all he could think about was a small apartment that smelled like cheap cleaning products and a little girl who'd spent 7 years dreaming of him. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, the city lights spreading out below like fallen stars. Somewhere out there, in a neighborhood he'd never thought about before today, his daughter was going to sleep, hopefully dreaming sweeter dreams than usual. And somewhere in that same apartment, Victoria was probably crying, terrified of what came next. Good, a dark part of Jonathan thought. She should be terrified. She'd stolen 7 years from him, 7 years he could never get back. But another part of him, the part that had felt Charlotte's small arms around his neck, heard her desperate hope, seen the way she moved so bravely on those crutches. That part knew the anger, while justified, couldn't be what drove him forward. Charlotte deserved better than parents fighting over her. She deserved the childhood she'd been denied. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Jonathan, you can't just drop that bomb and hang up. Call me back immediately." He smiled slightly. Margaret Hendricks was going to be an absolute force once she met Charlotte. She'd been asking for grandchildren since Jonathan turned 35, and he'd always put her off, married to his business. Now suddenly, she had a 7-year-old granddaughter she'd never known existed. Another text came through, this one from Karen. Found the specialist, Dr. Patricia Rodriguez at Seattle Children's Hospital, considered the best in pediatric prosthetics in the country. Also found several companies that make adaptive bikes. Do you want me to order samples? Order everything, Jonathan texted back. Price is no object. I want options. As he stood there, planning and plotting the way he always did when facing a challenge, Jonathan felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't just anger at Victoria, or even the fierce protectiveness he felt for Charlotte. It was something more fundamental, more primal. For the first time in his 43 years, Jonathan Hendricks felt truly needed. Not for his money, not for his business acumen, not for his power, but for himself. But a little girl had called out to the universe asking for a father, and somehow, impossibly, that call had reached him. He wasn't going to let her down. Not ever again. The paternity test results arrived 3 days later, but Jonathan had already known what they would say. The confirmation was merely a formality, a piece of paper that stated what his heart had recognized the moment he saw Charlotte's face. The test showed a 99% probability that he was her biological father. He sat in his office, the document in his hands, and felt the full weight of reality settle over him. He was a father. Charlotte was his daughter. And the little girl who'd been living 7 years without him had every legal and moral right to his protection, his support, his presence. "Marcus," he said into the phone to his lawyer, "set up a meeting with Victoria. Not at her apartment, neutral ground. And I want it soon." They met 2 days later at a quiet cafe in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood that split the difference between Jonathan's world and Victoria's. He arrived first, deliberately choosing a corner table where their conversation would have some privacy. When Victoria walked in, she looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed as though she hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for meeting me," Jonathan said as she sat down, his tone carefully neutral. "Did you think I wouldn't come?" Victoria's voice was strained. "You have every right to hate me, Jonathan. I've spent the last week expecting you to show up with lawyers and take Charlotte away. Is that what you think I want? To traumatize her more by ripping her away from the only parent she's ever known?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what you want. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm not sure I ever really knew." Jonathan leaned back, studying her. "You knew me well enough to make assumptions about how I'd react to a disabled child. You knew me well enough to decide I wasn't worthy of the truth. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Victoria." His voice remained low, but the intensity was scorching. "It's not fair that Charlotte spent 7 years wondering why her father didn't love her. It's not fair that I missed every moment of her life up until now. And it's definitely not fair that you played God with all of our lives based on your assumptions and fears." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself as if physically holding herself together. "You're right. You're absolutely right. So what happens now? Do you take me to court? Fight for full custody? I'll understand if you do. I'll even step aside if that's what you think is best for Charlotte." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, watching emotions flicker across her face. Fear, resignation, grief. Finally, he spoke. "Tell me about her. Tell me everything I've missed." Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting this. "What? 7 years of her life? I want to know all of it. Start from the beginning." So Victoria told him. She told him about the pregnancy, about the morning sickness that lasted months, about the first ultrasound where they detected the bone abnormality. She described the consultations with specialists, the devastating diagnosis, the decision to continue the pregnancy despite the challenges ahead. She was born on September 15th at 6:47 in the morning, Victoria said, her voice softening with the memory. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. And Jonathan, when they first put her in my arms, I thought my heart would burst. She had your eyes even then. This wise, serious look, like she was already figuring out the world. Jonathan's throat tightened, imagining that moment he'd never witnessed. Victoria continued, telling him about Charlotte's first year, the constant doctor visits, the way she'd been such a happy baby despite the pain she must have felt. She started trying to walk at 11 months, just like other babies, but her right leg couldn't support her weight. We tried braces, special shoes, everything. But by the time she was 3, the doctors were clear. The bone disease was progressing. If we didn't amputate, she risked it spreading further, potentially becoming life-threatening. How was she after the surgery? Jonathan asked quietly. Brave. Victoria smiled through her tears. Impossibly, heartbreakingly brave. She cried, of course. She was confused and scared, but within a month she was demanding to learn how to use crutches. By 6 months post-surgery, she was racing around the apartment, climbing things she shouldn't, refusing to let anything stop her. She gets that determination from you, Jonathan observed. No. Victoria shook her head. She gets it from you. I've seen that same stubbornness in your eyes when you set your mind to something. They sat in silence for a moment before Jonathan spoke again. Tell me about the hardest moments. Victoria's composure cracked further. Last year at school, she wanted to join the other kids for field day, races and games. The teacher said she could participate in some events but not others. And Charlotte. She came home and cried for hours. She asked me why God made her different, why she couldn't be like other kids. I didn't have an answer that made it better. Jonathan's hands clenched on the table. I should have been there. Yes, Victoria agreed simply. You should have. I robbed both of you of that, and I'll carry that guilt forever. The bike, Jonathan said after a moment. Why did you get her a regular bike for her birthday? You knew she couldn't ride it. Victoria's face crumpled. Because she asked for it. She's been asking for 3 years, ever since she saw other kids riding in the park. I kept putting it off, trying to save money for an adaptive bike, but they're so expensive and I couldn't. She took a shaky breath. I thought if I got her a regular bike, maybe we could figure something out. Maybe I could modify it somehow. I know it was stupid, but I couldn't bear to tell her no again. Jonathan felt his anger at her soften slightly, replaced by a different emotion. Pity for the impossible situation she'd put herself in through her own choices. Victoria, why didn't you at least reach out for financial help? You didn't have to tell me about Charlotte, but you could have asked for money for medical expenses and explain why I needed it? Jonathan, every dollar you gave me would have been a reminder of my lie. I couldn't do it. I made my choice, and I was determined to live with the consequences even if it meant Charlotte and I struggled. Noble, Jonathan said dryly, but incredibly short-sighted. Charlotte is the one who paid the price for your pride. I know. Victoria's voice broke. Don't you think I know that? Every time I couldn't afford the good prosthetic, every time I had to choose between physical therapy and keeping the heat on, every time she asked about her father and I had to lie, I knew. I've been drowning in that knowledge for 7 years. Jonathan pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. This is a check for $50,000. Consider it back payment for 7 years of medical expenses, living costs, and everything else you've shouldered alone. Victoria stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. Jonathan, I can't. You can, and you will. This isn't charity, Victoria. This is me taking responsibility for my daughter's care, which I should have been doing all along. His voice hardened. And there will be more. I've set up a trust fund for Charlotte. She'll never want for anything again. Medical care, education, whatever she needs. You're trying to take over her life. I'm trying to be her father. Jonathan's control slipped for a moment. his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. Damn it, Victoria, what did you expect? That I'd meet her once, write a check, and disappear? She's my daughter. I'm going to provide for her, protect her, be present in her life. That's not negotiable. And what about me? Victoria's voice was small. Where do I fit in this new arrangement? Jonathan looked at her for a long moment. That depends entirely on you. I spoke with my lawyer. I could fight for custody. And given that you've been keeping Charlotte from me for 7 years, I'd probably win. I have the resources to make your life very difficult if I chose to. Victoria's face went pale. But, Jonathan continued, Charlotte loves you. Despite everything, you've been a good mother to her in many ways. You've sacrificed for her, worked yourself to exhaustion for her, loved her fiercely. She deserves to have both of us in her life, not to be caught in a war between us. What are you proposing? Joint custody. We formalize it legally. Proper papers, schedules, all of it done right. I want Charlotte spending time with me regularly. I have a house with plenty of space, and I can provide opportunities you can't. But I'm not trying to replace you or erase you from her life. Victoria wiped her eyes. That's more generous than I deserve. This isn't about what you deserve, Victoria. It's about what's best for Charlotte. Jonathan's voice softened slightly. Look, I'm still angry. I'll probably be angry for a long time about what you took from me. But Charlotte needs stability, not chaos. She needs parents who can work together, not tear each other apart. I'll agree to whatever terms you want, Victoria said quietly. I just want her to be happy. Good, because there's something else. Jonathan pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. This is Dr. Patricia Rodriguez. She's the top pediatric prosthetics specialist in the country. I've already made an appointment for Charlotte next week, and this, he swiped to another image, is an adaptive bike designed specifically for children with one leg. I've ordered one in pink, Charlotte's size. Victoria stared at the images, tears streaming down her face. Jonathan, I'm also enrolling her in an adaptive sports program at Seattle Children's Hospital. They have everything: swimming, cycling, rock climbing. She'll be with other kids who have similar challenges, and she'll have professional guidance. I can't afford any of that. You don't have to. I'm covering all of it. Jonathan leaned forward. Victoria, I'm not doing this to make you feel inadequate or to show off my wealth. I'm doing this because Charlotte deserves every opportunity, and I have the means to provide them. Can you put your pride aside and accept that? Victoria nodded slowly, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll work with me. Say you'll stop keeping secrets that affect our daughter. Say you'll let me be the father Charlotte deserves, even though I'm starting 7 years late. I will. I promise. Victoria reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. Jonathan, I know I don't have the right to ask, but thank you. For not punishing Charlotte because of my mistakes. For being better than I gave you credit for being. Jonathan didn't take her hand, but his expression softened fractionally. Charlotte called me that day, asking for a father to teach her to ride a bike. I intend to be exactly that. A father who shows up, who doesn't give up, who proves to her that she's worth everything. I can't change the past 7 years, but I can make damn sure the next 7 are different. They finalized the details over the next hour. Custody schedules, financial arrangements, communication protocols. Jonathan's lawyer would draft formal documents, but they both agreed that their first priority was telling Charlotte the truth in a way she could understand. She needs to know I'm really her father, Jonathan said. Not just some man who showed up, and she needs to understand that her father didn't die, that he just didn't know about her. How do we explain why I never told you? Victoria asked, fear evident in her voice. Carefully, with language appropriate for a 7-year-old. Jonathan considered for a moment. We tell her the truth, that her mother was scared, that sometimes adults make mistakes, but that now we're fixing those mistakes together. We don't make you the villain in her story, but we also don't lie to her anymore. Victoria nodded, grateful for his restraint even as she recognized she probably didn't deserve it. That Sunday they told Charlotte together in Victoria's apartment. Jonathan had brought the adaptive bike, which sat in the hallway, a pink and silver marvel of engineering with a specialized support system and training configuration. Charlotte sat on the couch between them, her crutches leaning nearby, looking between them with wide, uncertain eyes. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No, sweetheart," Victoria said gently. "We just have some important things to tell you." Jonathan took a deep breath. "Charlotte, do you remember when you called me on your birthday? And you asked if I was your daddy?" She nodded silently. "Well, we did a special test to make sure, and it turns out I am your daddy. For real." Charlotte's eyes went huge. "Really? You're really my daddy?" "I really am." Jonathan's voice was thick with emotion. "And I'm so happy to be your daddy." "But," Charlotte's face scrunched up in confusion. "Mama said my daddy died before I was born. Did you undie?" Despite the gravity of the situation, both adults nearly smiled at the innocent question. Victoria spoke carefully. "Honey, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that I'm very sorry. Your daddy didn't die. I told you that because I was scared and I made a bad choice. The truth is, your daddy didn't know about you. I didn't tell him, and that was wrong of me. Why didn't you tell him?" Charlotte's voice was small, trying to understand. "Because I was afraid," Victoria admitted, tears in her eyes. "I was afraid of a lot of things, and I thought I was protecting everyone. But all I did was keep you and your daddy apart when you should have been together. And I'm so sorry." Charlotte looked at Jonathan. "Did you want to be my daddy?" "More than anything," Jonathan said fiercely. "Charlotte, if I had known about you, I would have been there from the very beginning. I would have been at the hospital when you were born. I would have been there for every birthday, every doctor visit, every moment. And I'm so sad that I missed all of that." "It's okay," Charlotte said with the quick forgiveness of childhood. "You're here now." Jonathan felt his heart crack open. "Yes, I am, and I'm never leaving. Charlotte, I want to be part of your life every single day. Would that be okay with you? Every day?" Her face lit up. "Does that mean you can teach me to ride a bike?" "Absolutely, in fact." Jonathan stood and walked to the hallway, returning with the adaptive bike. "I brought you something." Charlotte's gasp was audible. She struggled to her feet, grabbing her crutches, and moved toward the bike with wondering eyes. Is this for me?" "It's specially made just for you," Jonathan explained, kneeling beside her. "See this support here? It helps keep you balanced while you learn, and these pedals are positioned perfectly for someone with one leg. You can ride this, Charlotte, I promise." She touched the bike reverently, then looked up at him with tears streaming down her small face. "Can we try it now, please?" Jonathan looked at Victoria, who nodded through her own tears. "Let's go to the park," he said. 20 minutes later, they stood in a quiet park near the apartment. Jonathan held the bike steady as Charlotte climbed on, her left leg finding the pedal, her right stump resting in the specially designed support. Victoria stood nearby, her hands clasped together, watching. "Okay, sweetheart," Jonathan said, one hand on the bike's seat, the other on the handlebars. "I'm going to hold on while you practice pedaling. Just push down with your left leg and the bike will move forward. I've got you, I won't let you fall." Charlotte pushed tentatively, and the bike moved forward a few inches. She squeaked with surprise and delight. "That's it, again." They moved forward slowly, Jonathan jogging beside the bike, his hands steady and sure. Charlotte pedaled with increasing confidence, her face transforming with joy. "I'm doing it!" she cried. "Daddy, I'm doing it!" Daddy. The word hit Jonathan like a physical force. She'd called him Daddy naturally without prompting, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. His vision blurred with tears even as he kept his hands steady on the bike. "You're doing great, Charlotte. You're amazing." They went around the park's path 3 times, and by the end, Jonathan had loosened his grip significantly, letting Charlotte feel more of the bike's movement herself. When they finally stopped, Charlotte's face was flushed with exertion and happiness. "Did you see, Mama? I rode a bike." Victoria was openly crying now, but smiling. "I saw, baby. You were wonderful." Charlotte looked up at Jonathan, her small face serious suddenly. "Daddy, will you come back tomorrow? And the day after that? And the day after that?" Jonathan crouched down to her level, taking both her hands in his. Charlotte, I will be here every single day that I possibly can, and on days when I have to work, I'll call you. You'll never have to wonder where I am, or if I'm thinking about you, because I will be thinking about you every moment. I promise. Do you promise, like with your whole heart? I promise with my whole heart, my whole soul, and everything I am. Charlotte launched herself at him, nearly knocking him over, her crutches clattering to the ground as she wrapped her arms around his neck. I'm so glad you're my daddy. I'm so glad I called you. Jonathan held her tightly, this little girl who'd somehow found him against all odds, and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. All his life he'd been driven by ambition, by the need to build and conquer and succeed. But this? Holding his daughter, feeling her trust, knowing she needed him, this was the most important thing he'd ever do. Over Charlotte's head, he met Victoria's eyes. There was still pain there, still guilt and regret. They had a long road ahead. Conversations about the past, negotiations about the future, the complicated dance of co-parenting. But for now, in this moment, watching Charlotte's joy as she pointed at the bike and chattered excitedly about riding it again, they were united in one simple truth. This little girl was everything. And together, whether Victoria deserved it or not, they were going to give Charlotte the life she should have had from the beginning. A life filled with love, opportunity, and two parents who would move heaven and earth to see her smile. The following weeks unfolded like a dream Charlotte had never dared to fully imagine. Jonathan kept his promise, showing up every single day unless business absolutely demanded otherwise, and even then, he rearranged his entire schedule to minimize absences. He'd arrive at the apartment on Maple Street each morning at 7 o'clock, bringing fresh pastries from the bakery Victoria could never afford, sitting with Charlotte while she ate breakfast before school. Tell me about your homework, he'd say, genuinely interested in her second-grade assignments. Charlotte would light up, chattering about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, about the stories they read, about the art project she was working on. Victoria watched these interactions with a mixture of gratitude and heartbreak. Jonathan was everything she'd been too afraid to believe he could be. Patient, attentive, completely devoted to Charlotte's happiness. 3 weeks after their park day, Jonathan arrived with news that would change everything again. He waited until Charlotte was at school before sitting down with Victoria at her small kitchen table. I've been thinking about living arrangements, he began carefully. Victoria's stomach dropped. Jonathan, please. He held up a hand. Just hear me out. Your lease here is month to month, correct? And you're working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, in a neighborhood that's not exactly safe. Charlotte deserves better. You both do. If you're about to offer to pay for a better apartment, I'm not offering to pay for an apartment. I'm offering something different. I have a house in Mercer Island, 8 bedrooms. Far too much space for one person. I want you and Charlotte to move in with me. Victoria stared at him. Move in with you? The house has a separate wing that could be entirely yours and Charlotte's. Your own bedrooms, a private living area, complete independence if that's what you want. But Charlotte would be in a safe neighborhood, with access to the best schools, and I'd be there every day. No more rushing across town in traffic to see her for an hour. Jonathan, people would talk. They'd assume. I don't care what people assume. This isn't about us, Victoria. It's about giving Charlotte stability and opportunity. Victoria's mind raced. The practical part of her knew he was right. The apartment was cramped. The neighborhood had seen 3 break-ins in the past month, and she was exhausted from working constantly, yet never having enough. I need to think about it. Take your time. But Victoria, Charlotte asked me yesterday why she couldn't live with me like she lives with you. She wanted to know why she had to say goodbye every night. How do I explain to her that adult pride is keeping her from having what she wants? That evening, Victoria raised the subject with Charlotte. Sweetie, your daddy has a really big house with lots of rooms, and he thought maybe we could go live there. What do you think? Charlotte's face transformed. Really? We could live with Daddy in a house? Would you like that? Yes. Would I have my own room? Would Daddy be there when I wake up? Yes to all of those things. Then yes, yes, yes. 2 weeks later, they moved into Jonathan's house on Mercer Island. Charlotte pressed her face against the car window, her eyes huge as she took in the sprawling modern home with its manicured lawn and lake view. "This is where Daddy lives?" she whispered. "This is where we're all going to live," Victoria corrected. Jonathan was waiting at the front door. The moment the car stopped, Charlotte scrambled out with her crutches. "Daddy, this house is like a castle." He laughed, scooping her up. "Wait until you see your room." Charlotte's room was painted soft lavender, her favorite color. There was a canopy bed with gauzy white fabric, bookshelves stocked with books, a desk with art supplies, and a reading nook with soft cushions and fairy lights. But what made Charlotte burst into tears was the wall of photos, pictures from her life interspersed with new ones of her and Jonathan. "Do you like it?" Jonathan asked, suddenly uncertain. Charlotte couldn't speak. She just threw her arms around his waist and held on tight. That night, they ate pizza straight from the box in Jonathan's formal dining room. Charlotte chattered nonstop about her new room, about school, about everything. Later, after Charlotte was in bed, Jonathan waited for Victoria with 2 glasses of wine. To new beginnings, and to Charlotte getting the life she deserves. Victoria accepted the glass. They sat in silence before Jonathan spoke. "Can I ask you something? Did you ever plan to tell me? If Charlotte hadn't made that call, would I have ever known?" Victoria felt the question like a knife. "I don't know. I told myself maybe when she was 18. But honestly, I was a coward. I might have taken the secret to my grave." His jaw tightened. "That would have destroyed her eventually. I know, I hate myself for it. If she hadn't been brave enough to make that call, but she did. Charlotte saved us all." She refused to accept the story she'd been told. Jonathan set down his wine. "Which is why we need to talk about her medical care. I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Rodriguez for next week. She's going to evaluate Charlotte for a new prosthetic, something more advanced." "How much will that cost?" "It doesn't matter. Whatever Charlotte needs, she gets. No questions, no limits." Over the next month, life settled into a new rhythm. Charlotte flourished in ways that broke and healed Victoria's heart simultaneously. She'd wake each morning and move quickly with her crutches to Jonathan's room to wake him up. They'd have breakfast together before Jonathan drove Charlotte to school. Afternoons belonged to Victoria, but evenings were Jonathan's time, practicing on the bike, reading books, playing games. One evening, Victoria found them in Jonathan's study. Charlotte sat on his desk while Jonathan showed her something on his computer. "This is what Daddy does at work," he explained, pointing to graphs. "We make technology that helps people, and these numbers show how many we've helped this year." "That many? That's a lot of people." "It is. And someday, if you want, you could help even more people. You could be anything you want, Charlotte. A doctor, a teacher, an engineer, anything. Even with one leg. Especially with one leg. Because you've already learned something most people never learn. That challenges don't define you. How you face them does." Victoria watched from the doorway, her heart full of complex emotions. This was what Charlotte had needed. Someone who saw not her limitations but her potential. The appointment with Dr. Rodriguez arrived. The doctor, a warm woman with kind eyes, examined Charlotte thoroughly before sitting with both parents. "Charlotte is an excellent candidate for a more advanced prosthetic. I'd recommend a sports prosthetic with a microprocessor knee. It will give her much more natural movement." "How soon can we start?" Jonathan asked immediately. "We'll do a casting today. The prosthetic will take about 6 weeks to manufacture, then fitting and physical therapy. The whole process takes 3 to 4 months. And the cost?" Victoria asked quietly. Dr. Rodriguez glanced at Jonathan. "This particular prosthetic runs about $45,000. "I'll cover all of it," Jonathan said firmly. "Whatever she needs." Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "Charlotte is very lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Jonathan said, squeezing Charlotte's hand. "She's my daughter, and I'd give her the world." Charlotte beamed. "I don't need the world, Daddy. Just you." On the drive home, Charlotte fell asleep in the back seat. Jonathan and Victoria sat in silence until Victoria spoke softly. "She's different now, happier, more confident. She always had that potential. She just needed someone to believe in her completely. You're saying I didn't believe in her? I'm saying your guilt and fear colored everything. Charlotte felt that. She knew you saw her as someone who needed protection, rather than someone who could conquer the world. Victoria flinched. And you see her differently? I see her as full of infinite potential, with challenges that make her stronger rather than limitations that hold her back. You were so busy trying to shelter her from pain that you forgot to show her how to embrace joy. That's not fair. Maybe not entirely fair. You did the best you could. But she's thriving now because she has two parents with different strengths. You give her emotional security and unconditional love. I give her encouragement to push boundaries. Together, we're what she needs. Victoria absorbed this. I'm still trying to figure out how to not resent you. You sweep in and suddenly you're the hero, fixing everything I couldn't fix. I was 25, alone, terrified. I made terrible choices, but they were the only ones I could see at the time. Jonathan sighed. I'm not trying to make you feel that way. I'm just a father who missed 7 years and is trying to make up for lost time. Yes, I have resources you don't, but that doesn't diminish what you did. Keeping her alive, keeping her safe, loving her through everything. I kept her from you. I can never make up for that. No, you can't. But you can be the mother she needs going forward. Can you do that? I'm trying. Then that's enough. Later that night, Victoria found Jonathan in his study. Can I ask you something? Do you think Charlotte will ever forgive me? Truly? Jonathan considered carefully. I think children are remarkably forgiving. Right now, Charlotte is so happy to have both of us that she's not thinking about what she missed. But someday she might have questions, might feel anger. The best thing you can do is not let guilt drive your parenting. Love her, be present, and trust that the relationship you build now will be strong enough. What about you? Will you ever forgive me? Jonathan's expression hardened. I honestly don't know. Some days I'm grateful just to have her. Other days I think about everything I missed and I want to shake you and demand to know how you could do that to us. I'm so sorry. I know you are. Maybe someday that will be enough. For now, we focus on Charlotte. Everything else is secondary. Charlotte's voice drifted through the door. Mama, are you awake? Victoria went to Charlotte's room. What is it, sweetie? Charlotte sat up in bed. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For calling Daddy, even though you were scared. You let him come into our lives and now everything is better. We're a family now, a real family. Victoria's heart cracked. Charlotte was thanking her for something she hadn't done. It was Charlotte's bravery. But she could give her daughter this gift. The belief that both parents had wanted this. I love you so much, Charlotte. I love you too, Mama. And I love Daddy. We're the luckiest family ever. As Victoria returned to her room, she realized something profound. Charlotte had not just found her father. She'd given all three of them a chance at redemption. Jonathan from loneliness, Victoria from guilt and fear, and herself from a childhood of believing she wasn't complete. 7 years old and already wiser than both parents combined. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, Charlotte stood in Dr. Rodriguez's clinic wearing her new prosthetic leg for the first time. The sophisticated microprocessor knee gleamed under the lights, and Charlotte stared down at it with awe and trepidation. It feels weird, she announced, gripping the parallel bars. That's normal, Doctor, Rodriguez assured her. Your brain needs to learn how to work with the leg. But you're strong, balanced, and determined. I have no doubt you'll master this. Jonathan stood to one side, his heart in his throat. Victoria was on the other side, hands clasped tightly. The physical therapist, Sarah, positioned herself in front of Charlotte. Okay, Charlotte, just stand for now. Feel the leg taking some of your weight. Charlotte stood there, both feet flat on the ground for the first time in 3 years. Tears streamed down her face. Does it hurt? Victoria moved forward. No, I'm standing like a regular kid. Jonathan turned away, his own eyes wet. The simple joy in her voice was almost unbearable. Over the next hour, Charlotte took her first steps with the prosthetic. They were halting and uncertain, with Sarah supporting her, but they were real steps. walking without crutches, without hopping, just walking. By the session's end, Charlotte had walked the length of the parallel bars 3 times. She was exhausted, sweating, and grinning. "How do you feel?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "Like I can do anything," Charlotte breathed. As they left, Charlotte insisted on walking to the car even though it took much longer. Jonathan and Victoria walked beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. "Look, Daddy, I'm walking, really walking." "I see that, sweetheart. You're amazing." In the car, Charlotte chattered excitedly, but then her expression turned serious. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always." "There's a Christmas dance at school next week. Father-daughter dance. Would you come with me? And dance with me?" Jonathan's voice was thick. "Charlotte, I would be honored. We'll practice every day this week." That week, every evening, Jonathan and Charlotte practiced in the living room. He'd put on music and hold her hands, teaching her basic steps, encouraging her when she stumbled, celebrating every success. Victoria would watch from the doorway, her heart full of complicated emotions. The night of the dance arrived. Charlotte wore a new red velvet dress Jonathan had taken her shopping for. The school gymnasium was decorated with paper snowflakes and twinkling lights. "What if I fall? What if everyone stares?" Charlotte whispered. Jonathan knelt to her level. "Charlotte, you are the bravest person I know. You've overcome more than most of these people will face in their entire lives, and if you fall, then we'll get up together and keep dancing." She nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Okay, Daddy." They walked onto the dance floor, and Jonathan placed one hand on Charlotte's waist, holding her other hand. A slow song played, and they began to move. Charlotte concentrated intensely, watching her feet, but after a moment she looked up and smiled. "I'm doing it, Daddy." "You absolutely are." People were watching, but Jonathan ignored them, focused entirely on his daughter's face, on the joy radiating from her. "Thank you for being my daddy," Charlotte said suddenly. "Thank you for teaching me to ride a bike and to dance and to be brave." Jonathan's throat closed. He whispered, "Thank you for calling me that day. Thank you for finding me." They danced through 3 songs before Charlotte needed a break. They sat eating cookies, and Charlotte introduced Jonathan to her friends and their fathers. One father, Robert, approached. "Your daughter is remarkable. The way she carries herself. You should be very proud." "I am. More than I can express." "How long have you been a single father?" Jonathan was about to correct him when he saw Victoria enter the gymnasium, late from her shift. She'd changed into a simple dress and was scanning the crowd. When she spotted Charlotte, her face lit up with love and pride. "Actually, I'm not raising her alone," Jonathan said. "Her mother is incredible. Everything Charlotte is, every ounce of courage she has, came from her mother first." Robert followed his gaze to Victoria. "That's wonderful that you two can co-parent so effectively." Victoria made her way across the gymnasium. Charlotte spotted her and actually ran, stumbling slightly but running to show her everything. Victoria hugged her daughter, her eyes finding Jonathan's over Charlotte's head. He raised his glass of punch in a small salute. She smiled hesitantly back. They weren't perfect. They weren't in love. They barely trusted each other most days. But they were building something important, a life for Charlotte that was stable and overflowing with love from both sides. Later that night, after Charlotte fell asleep still wearing her dress, Jonathan and Victoria sat in the shared sitting area. For once, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. "She had a wonderful time," Victoria said. "Thank you for making it special. You don't have to thank me for being her father." "I'm not. I'm thanking you for being a good father. There's a difference." Victoria paused. "I saw the way you looked at her on that dance floor, like she was the only person in the world." In that moment she was. Victoria nodded, then took a deep breath. "Jonathan, I need to say something. I know I can never make up for the 7 years I stole. I know saying I'm sorry won't change anything. But watching you with Charlotte has taught me something. I was wrong about everything. Wrong about you. Wrong about what you'd be capable of. Wrong about what Charlotte needed. You've given her confidence and joy and possibilities I never could have provided alone. She wiped her eyes. And I'm trying very hard not to be jealous, not to resent that she lights up when you come home. I'm trying to be grateful instead. But it's hard to realize I was the obstacle in my daughter's happiness all along. Jonathan was quiet, processing. Victoria, Charlotte doesn't love you less because she also loves me. That's not how love works. You gave her 7 years of devotion. She knows that. What I give her is different, but it's not better, it's complementary. That's generous. It's true. Charlotte needs both of us. He leaned forward. But I need to say something too. I'm still angry. I don't know if that anger will ever go away, but I'm trying to channel it into being the best father I can be. For Charlotte's sake, I'm trying to forgive you. Are you succeeding? Some days more than others. But tonight, watching Charlotte dance, seeing her so happy, tonight I'm grateful that despite everything, we ended up here. The path was broken, but the destination is incredible. Victoria smiled through tears. She is incredible, isn't she? She's extraordinary and she's ours, both of ours. Let's never forget that, both. The weeks leading up to Christmas were magical. Jonathan took Charlotte to see the Nutcracker, and Charlotte whispered that someday she'd dance on stage like that. He didn't tell her it was impossible. Instead, he made a mental note to research adaptive dance programs. On Christmas morning, Charlotte woke early and ran to wake both parents, insisting they come downstairs together. Under the tree were carefully chosen presents from both Jonathan and Victoria. Charlotte opened each gift with explosive joy. Art supplies, books, a special doll with a prosthetic leg, new clothes, adaptive sports equipment. But the gift that made her cry was a photo album chronicling the past 4 months with a note. To Charlotte, the daughter who brought us all together. Love, Mom and Dad. Dad? Charlotte whispered, touching the word. You wrote Dad. That's what I am. Is that okay? Charlotte launched herself at him, then reached for Victoria too. This is the best Christmas ever. My first Christmas with a real family. Over Charlotte's head, their eyes met. This was the family they'd created from broken pieces. I love you both so much, Charlotte said. Promise me we'll always be together. We promise, they said in unison and meant it. And that afternoon, Jonathan's mother Margaret arrived for dinner. She'd met Charlotte twice before, but this was the first major family gathering. Margaret swept Charlotte into a hug. My granddaughter. Do you know how long I've waited for you? Charlotte giggled. I'm only 7, Grandma. I've been here the whole time. Well, now that I've found you, I'm never letting you go. Later, Margaret pulled Jonathan aside. She's wonderful, and you're good with her. Natural. Neither did I know I had that in me, Jonathan admitted. And Victoria? What's the situation? Complicated, we're co-parenting. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Jonathan, I've watched you two all day. The way you move around each other, communicate without words, both orient around Charlotte's needs. That's not just co-parenting. That's partnership. Mom, Victoria made choices that hurt me deeply. I can work with her for Charlotte's sake, but I'm not saying you should fall in love with her. I'm saying you already have more than most married couples achieve. Whether you acknowledge that is up to you. The day after Christmas, Jonathan received a call from his executive team. There was a crisis with a major client requiring him to fly to New York immediately. I can't, he said automatically. It's Charlotte's winter break. I promised. Jonathan, this contract is worth $200 million. Then we lose it. Find another way. I'm not leaving my daughter. There was stunned silence. Jonathan Hendricks never chose family over business. They found another way. The client agreed to video conferences. The deal stayed intact. And Jonathan kept his promise. Charlotte noticed. Daddy, if you need to work, I need to be with you more than I need to work. You're my priority, Charlotte. Always. She hugged him tight, and Jonathan realized he'd spent 43 years building an empire, but this 7-year-old had taught him what actually mattered. As New Year's approached, Jonathan sat in his study reflecting on how completely his life had transformed. 12 months ago, he'd been alone in a penthouse, master of his universe. Now he lived in a house filled with laughter. He had a daughter who needed him, who loved him unconditionally, who was teaching him bravery. His phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "Daddy, are you still working? I miss you. Come say goodnight." He smiled and headed upstairs. Charlotte was fighting sleep. "There you are," she said. "I wanted to tell you something before the year ends." "What's that, sweetheart?" "This year everything changed. I got a daddy and a new leg and learned to ride a bike and dance, but you know what the best part was?" "What?" "That someone finally heard me. I called out and you answered. Thank you for answering, Daddy." Jonathan held her close. "Thank you for calling, Charlotte. You saved me too." "I did?" "You absolutely did. I just didn't know I needed saving until I met you." As he tucked her in, he passed Victoria in the hallway. She'd been listening, tears streaming down her face. "She's right," Victoria whispered. Someone finally heard her. "I lived with her for 7 years and loved her with everything, but I never really heard what she was saying. I was so focused on protecting her that I didn't hear her asking to be liberated." Jonathan nodded. "We both hear her now. That's what matters." As midnight approached, all three stood on the balcony watching fireworks over the lake. Charlotte was between them, holding both their hands. "What are you wishing for?" Victoria asked. Charlotte smiled mysteriously. "I can't tell you or it won't come true." But Jonathan thought he knew, because he was wishing for the same thing, that this fragile, complicated, beautiful family they were building would last forever. 6 months later, on a warm June afternoon, Charlotte stood at the starting line of her first adaptive sports competition. She wore her running prosthetic in race number 7. Lucky number, Jonathan had said that morning. Now he stood in the stands with Victoria, both tense with anticipation. Charlotte had trained for months with her adaptive sports team, growing confident with her prosthetics. "Is she nervous?" Victoria asked. "She's ready," Jonathan said. "Look at her face." Charlotte was focused, determined, fierce. When the starting gun fired, she launched forward. Her gait was different from other runners, but powerful and effective. She didn't win, came in 4th. But the smile on her face as she crossed the finish line was pure triumph. Jonathan and Victoria rushed down. "Did you see? Did you see me run?" Charlotte was breathless, glowing. "You were amazing." Victoria hugged her. "Absolutely incredible," Jonathan added, lifting her up. "I'm so proud." "I didn't win, though." "Charlotte, 6 months ago you were learning to walk with a prosthetic. Today you ran a race. That's a massive victory." Later, driving home with Charlotte's 4th-place ribbon displayed proudly, Charlotte asked, "Daddy, do you think you'll ever get married?" "To Mama, maybe?" Jonathan's hands tightened on the wheel. Victoria froze. They'd carefully avoided any discussion of their relationship beyond parenting. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because at school, Emily said mommies and daddies who live together are supposed to be married. And we live together. So I thought maybe." Victoria turned to Charlotte. "Honey, your daddy and I care about each other very much. We work together really well. But being married is different. It means you love each other in a special way." Charlotte interrupted. "Don't you?" The question hung in the air. Jonathan pulled into their driveway, but no one moved. Finally, he spoke. "Charlotte, your mother and I are building something important, a family for you. We care about each other, but whether that's enough for marriage, that's complicated." "Why?" "Because," Victoria said gently, "sometimes adults hurt each other, and that hurt takes time to heal. Your daddy and I are still healing. But you could heal faster if you tried together, couldn't you?" Simple childhood logic. Their eyes met over the console, both seeing uncertainty reflected back. "Let's go inside," Jonathan said. "We'll talk more later." Charlotte nodded, clearly dissatisfied. As she headed inside, Victoria lingered. "Jonathan." "Not now. I can't process that conversation right now." But the question had been asked, and it echoed through the house for days. Jonathan found himself watching Victoria in new ways, seeing not just Charlotte's mother but the woman herself. The way she laughed at Charlotte's jokes, the gentleness when she brushed Charlotte's hair, the quiet strength she showed daily. And Victoria noticed Jonathan's small kindnesses, bringing her coffee in the morning, repairing her favorite chair without being asked, the respect he showed her opinions. They'd become partners, whether they'd meant to or not. 2 weeks later, Jonathan's company faced a major decision. An opportunity had arisen for international expansion, opening offices in London. It would require Jonathan overseas for potentially months. His board was unanimous this expansion was crucial. Jonathan should personally oversee it. "It's an incredible opportunity," his CFO said. "You've worked toward this for years." Jonathan sat in the boardroom looking at presentations, projections, undeniable logic, and all he could think about was Charlotte's face when he told her he'd be leaving. "No," he said simply. The room fell silent. "Sir?" "I said no. I'm not taking the London position. Send Martinez. I'm staying here. Jonathan, you've spent 20 years building this, and I have a 7-year-old daughter who needs her father present, not on another continent. My decision is final. I promised my daughter I'd be home for dinner." He walked out, leaving stunned silence. That evening, Jonathan found Charlotte in the backyard practicing bike tricks. "Daddy, watch this." She demonstrated a turn, wobbly but successful. He applauded. "That was great. Hey, can we talk?" Charlotte immediately looked worried. "Am I in trouble?" "No. I wanted to tell you something. My company wanted me to work in London for a long time, but I said no, because I'd rather be here with you." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You chose me over work?" "I'll always choose you, Charlotte. Always." She threw her arms around him. Victoria watched from the kitchen window, her eyes wet. She'd heard the news from his assistant Karen, who'd called to express admiration. Victoria knew what that decision cost him. Not financially, but in terms of the empire he'd built. He'd chosen Charlotte, chosen being present over being powerful. That night, after Charlotte slept, Victoria found Jonathan on the balcony. "She told me about London, about your decision. It wasn't a hard choice." "Yes, it was. Don't diminish what you gave up." Jonathan turned. "I didn't give up anything that mattered. I chose what mattered more." Victoria stepped closer. "Jonathan, can I say something? Will you really hear it?" He nodded warily. "I've spent 8 months watching you be an incredible father, watching you transform from a workaholic CEO into a man who defines himself by his daughter's happiness, watching you be patient with me when I didn't deserve it." She paused. "And I've fallen in love with you. Not the you from 8 years ago, but the you that exists now. The father, the partner, the man who chooses his daughter over everything. I don't expect you to feel the same. I know I hurt you too deeply, but I needed you to know." Jonathan stared, expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Victoria, you made choices that stole years from me. Years I can never get back. How am I supposed to just forgive that? I'm not asking you to fall in love with me. I'm telling you the truth of how I feel." Victoria's voice shook. "You asked once if I would ever have told you about Charlotte. I said I didn't know. But I know now. If Charlotte hadn't called, I would have kept that secret forever. Because I was a coward." Tears streamed down her face. "So no, I don't expect forgiveness or love. But I wanted you to know that watching you be Charlotte's father has been the greatest privilege of my life. You've taught me what real love looks like. You've liberated Charlotte from the limitations I put on her life." Victoria turned to leave, but Jonathan caught her wrist. "Wait." She stopped, not daring to hope. "I've been angry at you for 8 months, furious. Every time I looked at Charlotte, I thought about everything I missed because of your choices. I told myself I could never forgive you, never trust you, never see you as anything but the woman who robbed me." He pulled her around to face him. "But Victoria, these months, I've also watched you. I've seen how you've put Charlotte's needs above your pride, how you've supported my relationship with her even when it was hard, how you've transformed from a scared woman into a mother who encourages her daughter to be brave. I've seen your strength, your sacrifice, your love." His hand cupped her cheek. "And I've realized something. Holding on to anger was making me no better than you were 8 years ago. letting fear dictate my choices. Fear that if I forgave you, I'd be condoning what you did. Fear that if I let myself care, you'd hurt me again. Jonathan, let me finish. Charlotte asked if we'd ever get married. And I realized our 7-year-old daughter is braver than both of us. She reached out for what she needed despite not knowing how it would be received. Maybe it's time we learned from her. Victoria held her breath as Jonathan continued. I'm not saying I'm completely over the hurt. I don't know if I ever will be. But I can't deny that somewhere in these months co-parenting turned into partnership. And partnership turned into something more. Something I'm terrified to name. What if we name it anyway? Victoria whispered. What if we fail? What if Charlotte gets caught in the crossfire? Or what if we don't fail? What if we build something beautiful? What if we show Charlotte that even adults can be brave enough to risk their hearts? Jonathan was quiet, searching her face. Then, slowly, he leaned down and kissed her, soft, tentative, full of possibility and fear and hope. When they pulled apart, Victoria was crying. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that Charlotte deserves parents who love each other, who work together, who show her what it means to build something lasting. Are you saying? I'm saying I'm willing to try. Slowly, carefully, with Charlotte's well-being as our priority. Can you work with that? Victoria nodded, unable to speak. The next morning, Charlotte found them having coffee together on the balcony, sitting close, Jonathan's arm around Victoria's shoulders. Are you guys together? Charlotte's eyes were wide. Would that be okay? Victoria asked nervously. Charlotte's face split into the biggest smile. Are you kidding? That's what I wished for. Every birthday, every shooting star, I wished for a real family. And now we are one. She launched herself at both of them, and they caught her in a three-way hug, laughing and crying. We're taking things slow, Jonathan cautioned. But yes, sweetheart, we're going to try to be a real family. That's all I wanted, Charlotte said. Just for everyone I love to love each other too. Over the next months, Jonathan and Victoria dated carefully. Dinner after Charlotte slept, movies in the home theater, stolen conversations. They learned each other slowly, building trust brick by careful brick. They argued sometimes about parenting, about the past, about fears. But they learned to argue productively, to hear each other, to compromise. Charlotte watched them navigate disagreements with healthy communication. On Charlotte's 8th birthday, exactly 1 year after the phone call, they threw a party in the backyard. Charlotte's adaptive sports team came, school friends, Jonathan's mother, even Dr. Rodriguez. Charlotte wore her everyday prosthetic with pride, decorated with stickers. She played games, ran races, climbed on the playset. She was confident, joyful, completely herself. As the party wound down, Charlotte gathered everyone. I want to make a speech. She stood on a chair so everyone could see. Last year on my birthday, I was really sad. I thought I'd never have a daddy and I couldn't do things other kids could do. But then I did something brave. I called for help, and my daddy answered. She smiled at Jonathan, who was already tearing up. This year, I have a daddy who teaches me I can do anything. I have a mama who loves me no matter what. I have a new leg that lets me run. I have friends who think my leg is cool. And best of all, I have a family that chose each other. Charlotte paused. We didn't start out together. We had to find each other. But that makes us even more special, because we chose this. Thank you, everyone, for being part of my story. Thank you for helping me believe I could be brave. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Later, after guests left and Charlotte showed her grandmother her presents, Victoria and Jonathan stood together watching their daughter. She's going to change the world, Victoria said softly. She already has. She changed mine. And mine. Jonathan pulled out a small box. Victoria's breath caught. I know we said we'd take things slow, and we have. It's been a year of learning each other, building trust, becoming a family, and I think I'm ready for the next step. If you are. He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. Victoria Hayes, would you marry me? Would you let me be not just Charlotte's father, but your partner in every way? Would you build this life with me? Officially, And completely? Victoria was crying too hard to speak, but she nodded vigorously. Jonathan slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed while their daughter cheered from inside, having apparently been watching. "I knew it!" Charlotte shouted, running out with complete confidence. "I knew you'd get married. This is the best birthday ever." She crashed into them, and they held her tight, this remarkable little girl who'd refused to accept limitations. She'd reached out in hope and faith, and in doing so had healed not just her own broken heart, but theirs as well. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony in their backyard, with Charlotte as flower girl, walking confidently down the aisle, her prosthetic decorated with white ribbons. As Jonathan and Victoria exchanged vows, Charlotte stood between them, holding both their hands, beaming with pride. They were a family, not perfect, not without scars, but real and loving and brave. That night, after the celebration, Charlotte asked Jonathan to tuck her in. "Daddy, do you remember the first thing I said on the phone?" "How could I forget? You asked me to teach you to ride a bike." "Did I do good? Did I learn?" Jonathan smiled. "Charlotte, you learned to ride a bike. But more than that, you taught me something even more important." "What's that?" "You taught me that the bravest thing we can do is ask for what we need even when we're scared. You taught me that love is worth risking everything for. And you taught me that sometimes the most important call we'll ever answer is from someone who needs us." Charlotte smiled sleepily. "So I did good?" "You did extraordinary. You changed 3 lives with one phone call. You brought us all together. You're my hero." "You're my hero too, Daddy. Thank you for answering when I called. Thank you for calling. Thank you for being brave enough to reach out. Thank you for being you." As Charlotte drifted off, Jonathan stood watching her. Behind him, Victoria appeared, slipping her hand into his. "Happy?" she asked. "More than I knew was possible." They stood watching their daughter sleep. Jonathan thought about the journey that brought them here, a desperate phone call, a CEO who'd learned success meant nothing without love, a mother who'd learned protecting sometimes meant letting go, and a little girl who'd refused to accept she was broken, reaching out instead for wholeness. Charlotte had spent 7 birthdays wishing for a father. In finding him, she'd given him everything he'd been missing: purpose, love, a reason to be more than successful, a reason to be good. The next morning, Charlotte burst into their room with her usual energy. "Mama, Daddy, can we have pancakes, and after can we go to the park?" And then, "Slow down," Jonathan laughed, pulling her onto the bed between them. "We have all day. We have all the time in the world." Charlotte snuggled between them, completely content. "I'm so glad I called you, Daddy. I'm so glad you're here." "Me too, baby. Me too." As they lay there together, this family that had been broken and scattered, now whole and unified, Charlotte whispered, "This is what I always wished for. This exactly." Victoria kissed her head. "Dreams do come true, baby. Sometimes they just take a little courage and a lot of love." "And a phone call," Charlotte added with a giggle. "And a phone call," Jonathan agreed, pulling them both close. Outside, the sun rose over the lake, painting the sky brilliant colors. Inside, a little girl who'd spent 7 years believing she was incomplete had discovered the truth. She'd always been whole. She just needed to be brave enough to reach out and claim the love that was waiting for her all along. And somewhere in heaven the universe smiled, satisfied with the story it had written, a story of redemption, second chances, and the extraordinary courage of an ordinary little girl who refused to accept that broken things couldn't be made beautiful again.